Welcome, everyone. Please stand and join us in a moment of silence, followed by the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Again, welcome. My name is Todd, and I am an alcoholic. My sobriety birthday is July 31st, 2018. Welcome to the 7 p.m. Thursday night evening meeting of the Treasure Map group of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Before we start our evening, please remember to shut off or silence your cell phones. Thank you. We send a special welcome to any visitors who are from out of town. Please stand and introduce yourself. Everybody's local, all right. Also, anyone who may be visiting the Treasure Map meeting for the first time, please stand. I'm sorry? Oh, awesome. No reason to be bashful. Also, is there anyone here who is at their first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous? All right. We're very happy you're here tonight, and you are welcome here. If you'd like, please come over to the welcome table over on the side here. We do have a gift for you. Once again, thank you for being here. That's very important to us. The Treasure Map group of Alcoholics Anonymous believes in working the 12 steps as outlined in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous with a sponsor. There are many home group members here tonight that are willing to be sponsors. If you are new or if you don't have a sponsor, you can stop at the side table over here during a break or after the meeting, and we have a list of group members who are willing to be sponsors. As I said, this is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we're very glad you're here. Newcomers, welcome. In keeping with our singleness of purpose and our third tradition, which states that the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking, we ask that all who participate confine their comments to their problems of alcohol. We want to make a special mention of our online listeners. We have heard from many of you who are trying to make your experience with us even better. Thank you for being with us tonight. If during this meeting you experience a lapse in hearing us, please post a note on our secret group face page, and we will be monitoring that throughout the meeting. Now, we do have, for Tradition 7, an online donating that is available at the Treasure Map website. It's a great way to support the group. And that, when you are supporting the group like that, it helps pay the bills, events, speaker costs, birthday celebrations, and newcomer welcome meetings. To begin that Tradition 7 from fulfillment, please stop over at the side table or visit www.treasuremapmeeting.com. In addition, the Treasure Group is a proud financial supporter of the local Sioux Falls Intergroup, Southeast South Dakota AA District 5, AA statewide of South Dakota, Area 63, and worldwide AA through World Services in New York. Also, if you give online, please grab one of these tags as a basket pass so we can keep track of that. Also, we don't have tables here tonight, but over on the side table, we've got the Treasure Map meeting cards. It's a great way to get the word out about Treasure Map, about AA. You can write your name, phone number. It's a great way of contacting people and staying in touch. Our free Big Book study worksheets at www.treasuremapmeeting.com. Many are using these worksheets to assist in their own personal Big Book studies, complement their sponsorship duties, and aid in their step work. These sheets should not be considered as the final word on Big Book, only one guide that has been helpful to us. We realize we know only a little. Over the past 15 months, over 8,000 listeners have heard live or re-listened to our speakers. And we thank you and appreciate you, and we desire to continue to serve them. Special events. They are listed on our homepage of the website, but we have June 22nd. That's the 8th annual Bike and Burger Ride. It starts at Westside here in Sioux Falls and goes to Brookings, and then they have lunch at Nick's Burgers. July 13th, Sioux Falls Intergroup Annual Picnic at the Falls Park. July 20th, Area 63 Assembly in Pierre. July 19th through the 21st is the North Dakota Young People's AA in Bismarck. July 26th through the 28th is the Paha Sapa Mountain Conference in Deadwood. August 2nd through the 4th is the Bad Axe Men's Retreat in Park Rapids, Minnesota. The Treasure Map meeting is going to be co-sponsoring a bus trip to the International AA Convention July 2nd through the 5th, and that is in the year 2020. So we'll see if that's coming up in a year. We've got flyers on the table for that. We are looking for District 5 corrections and treatment people that are willing to run meetings at the Minnehaha County Jail, the Work Release Center, and the South Dakota State Penitentiary. A background check is required and a minimum of 3 months of continuous sobriety. Contact Matt M at mcexpert.com. We will be having our Group Conscious meeting here on the 27th of this month after the meeting. Okay, the AA preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We're self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. Our meeting tonight is a speaker meeting that will focus on the traditions And then we also have a short meeting for that. Or a short speaker prior to that before a break. And now help me welcome Erica to read how it works.
I'm Erica, alcoholic. I'm going to read how it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates, they are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you've decided that you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. At some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us, but there is one who has all power, that one is God. May you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested of our program recovery. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we have harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, stopped through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaimed, "What an order! I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow on spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if he were sought.
Thank you, Erica. Now help me welcome Brandon to read the 12 traditions as we pass the baskets. Thank you in advance for your generosity and support. Tradition 7 states that every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions.
I'm Brandon, I'm an alcoholic. These are the 12 traditions. 1, our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. 2, for our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority. A loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants, they do not govern. 3, the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. 4, each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. 5, each group has but one primary purpose, to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. 6, an AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. 7, every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. 8, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. 9, AA as such ought never be organized, but we may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. 10, Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues, hence the AA name ought never be drawn to public controversy. 11, our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need to always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. 12, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities.
Thanks, Brandon. Everybody's taller than I am. Okay, we talk a lot about home group memberships at the Treasure Map group because we believe it is vital to our recovery. What does it mean to be a home group member? Here's a brief excerpt from the AA General Service Conference approved pamphlet on the AA group. Traditionally, most AA members through the years have found it important to belong to one group they call their home group. This is the group where they accept service responsibilities and try to sustain friendships. And although all members are usually welcome at all groups and feel at home at any of these meetings, the concept of the home group has still remained the strongest bond between the AA member and the fellowship. With membership comes the right to vote on issues that might affect the group and might also affect AA as a whole, a process that forms the very cornerstone of AA's service structure. As with all group conscious matters, each AA member has one vote, and this ideally is voiced through the home group. Over the years, the very essence of the AA strength has remained with our home group, which, for many members, becomes our extended family. Once isolated by our drinking, we find in the home group a solid, continuing support system, friends, and very often a sponsor. We also learn firsthand through the group's workings how to place principles before personalities in the interest of carrying the AA message. Talking about her own group, a member says, "Part of my commitment is to show up at my home group meetings, greet newcomers at the door, and be available to them, not only for them, but also for me. My fellow group members are the people who know me, listen to me, and steer me straight when I am off in left field. They give me their experience, strength, and AA love, enabling me to pass it on to the alcoholic who still suffers." If you are interested in making Treasure Map your home group, please see Scott over at the back or the side table over here during the break or after the meeting. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our short speaker for tonight, and that is Brian.
Hello everyone, my name is Brian, I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is February 6, 2019. It wasn't me, it was in part my higher power, this program, and good sponsorship. They asked me tonight to speak. I wasn't really expecting to, so bear with me here. So I guess what it was like. Growing up, pretty normal childhood up until age 12. Loving family, mom and dad both in the house. They ended up in a pretty messy divorce. With that, there wasn't a lot of supervision for my brother and I after that. My brother's 5 years older than me. He took to partying, and I was always tagging along with them, and alcohol became very readily available for me. My mom was trying to, as I put it, I'm trying to be respectful, trying to find a new dad. So she was out bar hopping a lot too. There was always booze in the fridge. And I remember my first drink being right around that 12-year-old. I loved it from the beginning. The taste was not so much, but I loved what it did to me. I loved that feeling that I don't know. I didn't feel alone. I didn't feel that hole anymore. I have a feeling you get what I'm saying. I don't know how to put it in words. There was something to it, and I was on board with whatever it was. I also experimented with some other things during that time, but keeping with the singleness of purpose, I'll keep with the alcoholism. Growing up through middle school, high school, got into a lot of trouble because of my drinking. By the time I was a sophomore, I had 6 MICs, 3 open containers, and an under 21 driver. That ended up getting dropped to reckless driving. So I was always in trouble with the law. Ironically enough, my entire family's law enforcement, and I always joke with them and say I took a slightly different path. Yeah, so high school, nothing really too bad. Like, I always downplayed everything. Yeah, I got in trouble, but it was just because I was the one that got caught. I didn't think that I had a problem. As far as I can remember, I was always the one trying to finish the keg at the parties. I was always the one up at 3 when everyone else was going to bed. Once I started, the only thing in mind was more. And I would do anything to get more. I was never thinking about the drink at hand. It was always 5 from now, 10 from now. Am I going to have enough alcohol in 5 hours, 6 hours? So ended up going to college. Amazingly enough, I had good enough grades to get to college with all the drinking. I went to the University of South Dakota, and I found people who drank more like I did right when I got there. I didn't go with a lot of people from high school. I was a pretty small graduating class, so I got to meet new people, and I remember constantly trying to find people who drank like I did. Like maybe these people were just too sheltered, and I did, and that worked out great until I drank more than them. So then I'd find new friends, and I'd drink more than them, or get uncontrollable when I drank. And looking back now, I want to say it was probably 18, 19 when I started to really realize, not that long into college, that there was something going on here. I'd gone to behavioral health a couple times. I'd get drunk, threatened to kill myself. I tried to overdose. I tried to shoot myself, just without getting too much, just insanity. And that was a pattern, but I never blamed the alcohol for it. I was always blaming other people. I was always blaming other things for my unhappiness. It couldn't have possibly been me and my drinking or the fact that my life was completely unmanageable. It was always if they would have treated me better, or if I would have had this car, or if I would have been with that girl, or had that job, or made that much money. That was what I was worried about. It took a long time for me to see that. So drinking probably hit its peak a few years after. I was at a party in college, and there's a gentleman who played rugby, and they were looking for a guy to play on the team the next day. And I was like, I don't know anything about rugby. And he said that after the game, there was all you could drink booze for free. So I played rugby, and I ended up falling in love with the sport, and it was great. My drinking toned down a little bit. I was able to control it as best as I could to get to practices. I started working out a lot bigger than I am now. Just getting in shape, feeling good about life. Now I found guys who like to party. I found my identity as a rugby player in South Dakota. Not setting myself up for anything there, but no, it went well, and eventually alcoholism caught up with me again, and I had to quit playing because my health just started going terrible. Over the span of about 2 years, I lost 50 pounds. I was down to 128.2 pounds, living in Sioux Falls. I failed out of college. Came here, and I call it an act of God now, but I had finally had enough. I woke up, decided I was going to have one last bender, don't remember much, but I ended up calling my mom in a blackout, and I had already arranged to go to Keystone, and they had a bed open for me. And she took me down there. Should have probably died with what my blood alcohol was, but made it through. And I think what didn't stick when I went there was I knew I wanted to get sober, but I wasn't willing to surrender. I thought treatment was the answer, right? People go to treatment and they stay sober and their lives get great. And I didn't realize how much work this takes. And more importantly than the work, I had to be honest with myself. I had to look people in the eyes and tell them exactly what I had done and what my troubles and my struggles were. And I was not willing to do that. So when I got out of treatment for the first time, I was able to stay away from alcohol for 1 year and 6 days, but I was filling that with gambling, with drug use, with other stuff. And in my mixed up thinking, well, at least I didn't drink. I would tell people, no, I'm sober. I don't drink now. But, I left out the other part, that lying by omission. So I really don't even count that as sobriety because it wasn't. I was still using, I was still lying, I was still manipulating, I was still doing all the stuff I did before. I just wouldn't get a DUI. So probably a year and a half after, after I had relapsed, I went on a 4-month bender. I cashed out my 401k, decided I was going to live off of that. Things got bad fast. I don't know exactly how many days, but it wasn't long. Once I took that first drink, it had me again. I quit praying. There was no God. Why would God do this to me? The poor pity party, which I always fall into. So ended up with another suicide attempt. Went to Tallgrass last June. Walked in scared. What if it's not going to work this time? What am I going to do different? I got as open and honest as I could, still holding on to a few things for my 5th step. I was always afraid of that lightning bolt coming down from a God I didn't believe in. But I think I did as best as I could at that time. From the time I got into treatment in June until this last February, which is kind of my rationalization for what I blamed my last relapse on, was I lost 9 people who were relatively close to me. A few family members, some suicides, overdoses, and drunk driving. And instead of being open and honest and talking with the fellowship, with people who get it, who have the thoughts that I do, I bottled it all up. I put on that classic, I'm okay, when inside I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to feel. My answer for everything was taken away. I couldn't drink. I didn't know how to live life on life's terms. I knew how to white knuckle and still be not very valuable person to society, very mean, very bitter, very angry. And I finally gave in. I convinced myself, I earned this. I've been sober long enough. Bad things happen to me. What do people do when bad things happen? They get drunk. That's not what people do. That's what alcoholics do. I wasn't able to see that. I can now. Thank the Lord that a light has come on. So I went back into Tallgrass. They agreed to take me back on the stipulation that once I completed treatment, I'd go into sober living. And that is an absolute blessing for me. I don't think that I would have been able to be sober this long without it. I never thought that I'd be grateful to be in a halfway house, but now I'm beyond grateful. It worked out too that they had 1 bed open and things just seemed to fall into place once I got out of my own way. So I got into Tallgrass this time. This was the end all. I attempted suicide again. My mom actually found me in the act of trying to off myself. And they took me in. I don't know what rock bottom is. I mean, everyone says you hit a rock bottom, but it seems like mine always have a trap door. It just keeps getting lower and lower and lower. Anyway, I got to Tallgrass and I had told myself, either this is going to work or I'm going to go somewhere and just take care of it. I don't say that for shock value or anything. That's just where I was at mentally. I had given up. I couldn't imagine, as the book says, life with alcohol or without alcohol. I didn't know how to live. My 5th day in there, my mom showed up and she was crying. So right away I knew something bad had happened, and she let me know that my dad had passed away. I remember just shock and awe, basically. He was on my amends list, a big one on my amends list. And I had this pattern of I'd work the steps and give it my all, and I'd get done with my 4th step, move on to my 5th step, and okay, I'm cured. when it got to the actual action, I didn't do it. And if I would have, I know it's a would have statement, but that's something I get to live with now and take with me. They let me go to his funeral, and it was tough, but I made it through it. And it was the first death that I've experienced since the age of 12 that I didn't think about drinking. I had prayed to God to give me the strength going up there, whatever God may be. I didn't know. I just needed something. I needed something, and I was willing to believe. Shortly after this, I don't know what you call it, ceremony, whatever, I went and I used the restroom, and I remember, I know it sounds crazy, but I'm throwing it out there anyway. I felt just like I had finally been able to give up and surrender. The sense of peace hit me, and there I was in the dirty funeral home bathroom. I hit my knees and I gave it to God. Whatever it was that I felt, it's kept me believing now. So I look at that as my higher power saying, you'll get through this, you'll be okay. And for the first time in a long time, I felt it. I genuinely felt like there was light at the end of the tunnel if I stick with this thing. Got back to Tallgrass. I took in as much as I possibly could. I read books. I read the big book multiple times. I jumped into NA. I talked to everyone I could at meetings, got numbers. And from day one now, when I had gotten out, I live AA now. It's not just something I do anymore. It's not something that might work. It's not something that could help. It's something that I completely bought into. Because of this program, this is the longest I've been sober in 16 years. And that's not by my doing. That's because I'm taking advice from men and women who've walked before me, who have been willing to give up and to use each other and help each other with the fellowship. That was a big thing I had trouble with when I first came into AA. I thought it was just you work these steps and you're sober, but I didn't realize there was two sides to it. You got the fellowship and you got the step work. And now I am utilizing the heck out of both of those things. A big thing that helps me now too is doing anything that I can to help another alcoholic, whether it be talking to them, giving them a ride, going to a meeting with them, being there for them, helping them out when I can, just stuff to get myself out of my own head and out of my way. And I'm not doing it thinking like this is going to keep me sober. I do it because it's the right thing to do. And I never thought that I would be at that point in my life. Life today, it's more than I could have asked for, and I'm just getting started. These promises are starting to come true, and I'm almost getting anxiety attacks thinking that life's going okay now and I don't know how to act. I'm so used to having the chaos and stuff going wrong. I was just talking to a gentleman before the meeting here, and for the first time in my life, I have an attitude of I get to go to work today. It's no longer I have to. I get to go to work. I get to be responsible. I get to pay my bills. I get to call my mom and not have to have her worry about me being in jail or being in an accident or trying to kill myself. I can't express enough my gratitude for this program and that what my higher power is doing for me. I think that's all I got. Thank you for asking me to speak, and thanks for listening.
Thanks, Brian. That was awesome. Short notice. You did great. Okay, we're going to take a short 10-minute break. If you're a smoker, right outside the door here, you can police your own butts. That's awesome.
Right. That was from the heart. It wasn't prepared. Is it Alyssa? Estelle. I wouldn't introduce myself. I've met her before, but and then I got up here and I'm thinking, oh shit! If I gotta say her name, I don't remember it now. Because normally I write it down.
Let's go. Order two, maybe a little longer. Let's get for 45 minutes.
Okay. Okay. That was great. There you are.
Okay, we're back. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Estelle, who's from Sioux Falls here, and she's going to talk about the traditions. So help me welcome Estelle.
Hello. My name is Estelle and I'm an alcoholic. Brian, terrific job. I was nodding my head a lot when you were talking. I appreciate that. I'm going to take this off because I talk with my hands. I'm a good German girl, and I'll be just a distraction. I'd like to thank Mike for asking me to come share on the traditions, but I will say every time Mike asks me to come speak at this group, he's out of town. So I know he's listening tonight, so I'll just give him a little crap about that. So as I said before, my name is Estelle and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is March 1st, 1996. My home group is the Black Sheep group here in Sioux Falls. We meet on Monday nights. I really enjoy this meeting and have been asked to share several times, and I appreciate the format and the announcements, and most of all, talking about the traditions. I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to service, and I have a sponsor, I have a home group, and you know, I've been doing the deal because when I didn't do the deal, things did not go well. I'm just going to share just a little bit of my story. So I identify as an alcoholic. I'm not a member of a Kiwanis club that just happened to come in to talk about the traditions. I had my first drink when I was 14 years old, and quite honestly, it was, you know, I usually say most people in this room will remember where they were, who they were with, what they did, who they puked on. Their first drink was very monumental, and that was me. I was at a small town street dance in Hosmer, South Dakota, and somebody passed peach schnapps and Pepsi my way, and I was ease and comfort. You know, I love how it talks about in the doctor's opinion. You know, it just changes our whole perception on things. And I continued on like that for many years. I won't go into the whole gory detail, but I will tell you this. I was meeting with a church friend of mine last night, and we were talking about life and that sort of thing. And I was telling her some of the stuff that we share at the podium and laugh about. And she's like, "You've had a really rough life." And I started laughing, and she goes, "God has just graced you, you know?" And I thought about that after I left her, and you know what? It truly is by the grace of God that I'm standing here. In sobriety, outside of sobriety, I mean, it truly is by the grace of God. And I always want to remember that. So when I sobered up in March of 1996, I grew up in Aberdeen, and there weren't a lot of chicks that were going to the meeting I was going to, and so I had an old-timer, very safe male that said he would be my sponsor until I found a chick sponsor. And Jim took me line by line to the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I will forever be grateful for that. And that's how I sponsor girls, is we go line by line out of Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And then we went line by line out of the 12 and 12. It's not 12 by 12, that's a piece of wood. This is my original book, and it's fallen apart. I only pull it out for special occasions, and this is a special occasion. There's notes in there of what I thought about the traditions when I first went through them, what I thought about the steps, and how I've evolved from that. And I got active in service right away. They always told me that if you stay in the middle of the pack, you don't get taken off by the lions that come along. And so I'm like, okay, I want to be in the middle of the pack. And so I've had all kinds of service positions, including serving as your delegate in New York for the General Service Conference. And what a phenomenal experience. I've met people all over the country. If you're new here or you've been around for a while and you travel somewhere, you will have friends instantly. You basically can call somebody up and trust that they're going to come pick you up for the meeting and take you home afterwards or take you back to your hotel, and they're not going to stab you or anything like that. It's really cool. You know, you get to meet all these different people, and there's just a fellowship among us. So that's briefly my story. I love the book AA Comes of Age. If you have not read it, it's our story. It's our story of how we came to be sitting in these rooms. And of course, the big book talks about the steps and recovery. And AA Comes of Age talks about how we hung on by a thread so many different times. And I'm going to reference AA Comes of Age quite a bit because it talks about how the traditions came about and why we have them. So I'm just going to start by reading, because I'm going to cover 4, 5, and 6. So I'm going to read the long form of the traditions. Number 4, with respect to its own affairs, each AA group should be responsible to no other authority than its own conscience. But when its plans concern the welfare of neighboring groups also, those groups ought to be consulted. And no group, regional committee, or individual should ever take any action that might greatly affect AA as a whole without conferring with the trustees of the General Service Board on such issues. Our common welfare is paramount. So basically, and I love when you guys come up and read the traditions, autonomy is a really big word, but that's what Tradition 4 is talking about. The short version simplifies it by saying each group should be autonomous, except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. It's no coincidence, if you think of the triangle of Alcoholics Anonymous, unity, service, and recovery, it's no accident that the traditions are under unity. And in AA Comes of Age, that's the section that they're in. And Bill wanted to see this thing survive long before him, or long after him and Bob had passed away. And that's what keeps us whole, is the traditions. And there's a section here where he says the 12 traditions are to the group survival and harmony what AA's 12 steps are to each member, sobriety and peace of mind. So that tells me that traditions are pretty important. And what I've done over the years is applied the traditions to my life personally. Well, let me back up. I'm not going to take credit for that because my sponsor told me that every Estelle should be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. That was the first tradition I learned because I was one of those gals that, you know, if you had something I wanted, I would take it. So, but you know, the traditions themselves not only help the group to survive, but they also help us as individuals. So tradition 4, let's talk a little bit more about that. So basically, any 2 or 3 alcoholics, when they gather together, may call themselves a group, provided that they have no other affiliations. I'll give you an example. When I was delegates get tasked to assist with tradition breaks if they happen. We have no authority or anything like that, but just general education. And there was a group that wanted to take their funds and purchase or support a softball team. And so they asked me if I would just provide some education on that. And again, no authority. The group is autonomous. They could do whatever they want, but they were affiliating with another entity. And so I just provided some information, and actually it went really well. They ended up having a traditions workshop and they didn't have the information, you know? So a lot of times when people are not following our traditions as a whole, they just don't have the information. And so I think that's our responsibility as members of Alcoholics Anonymous to know what they mean, you know? So when Bill writes about this, he talked about all the groups sent in their rules of what their group had for rules, and there were just hundreds of them. And there was one particular group that had 61 rules. Like you couldn't do this and you couldn't do that. And one gentleman wrote rule number 62. And if you've ever read the 12 and 12, it talks about rule 62, don't take yourself so damn seriously. And so you'll see that in AA meetings. And it's just a friendly reminder that we don't need human authority to tell us what to do. Because we either have John Barleycorn or God to dictate what's going to happen in our lives. And that's where that spiritual part of our program comes in, is that, you know, we don't need someone dictating how we should function, because to drink is to die, and to go with God is, you know, to live a fruitful life. So Bill writes about that as well. And then he goes on to say, I am waiting for you to do my will is what the two options are. The other authority is named John Barleycorn, and he says, you better do God's will or I will kill you. So, you know, there's that. One other thing about tradition 4 is and Bill talks about this throughout these 3 traditions, is, you know, when they first came up with the idea of having Alcoholics Anonymous, there were many grandiose ideas. They were going to build hospitals and education centers and do all this kind of, you know, outside work. And quickly realized that, well, first of all, and he says it in here too, hospitals don't like alcoholics. So he was going to have a hospital just for alcoholics. And then, you know, educating alcoholics was difficult. So we were going to have an education just for alcoholics. Well, this sounds a lot like what happened to the Washingtonians back in the 1800s. And I'm a huge history buff, and I won't go into too many details, but I don't want to put you to sleep if you're not a history buff. But back in the 1860s, around the Civil War time, there was a group called the Washingtonians, and they sobered up quite a few men, mostly. And then they started getting involved in abolitionism and all these outside issues and started fighting amongst themselves, and eventually fell apart. And Bill was concerned that that would happen to us if we started getting involved with all of these outside issues. And so that's why each group is autonomous, as long as they don't have any outside affiliation. Okay, if you want to reference, and you do have this beautiful book, I am referencing page 105, 106, 107 through 109. Just thought I'd add that. All right, moving on to tradition 5. I'll read the long form here. And the long form is kind of like the short form. Each Alcoholics Anonymous group ought to be a spiritual entity having but one primary purpose, that of carrying its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. So most emphatically then, AA has but one single purpose, to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. That is our main objective, our real reason for existence. So when I was newly sober, I remember a speaker talking about what's its message. What's the message? You know, if it's clouded with a lot of extra stuff, it may not appeal to a real alcoholic like me, you know? Because when I first started coming to meetings, I would hear every difference possible. Like if I heard Brian's story, well, I didn't go to jail, I didn't try to commit suicide that many times. I mean, I was always looking for something different. And that terminal uniqueness about killed me. And so, what is our message? And that's what I encourage you to think about, is what is the message of Alcoholics Anonymous? And Shoemaker, stick to thy last is the first thing that you read in the 12 and 12. And it means that we would rather do one thing really well than a lot of things really poorly, you know? And I apply that to my own life. My primary purpose is to stay sober. Then everything else kind of falls into place. But when I try to cloud my life with so many different things, I'm not doing any of them any good service, you know? And so that's what Bill's talking about in here. Though AA is obliged to both medicine and religion, we cannot become experts in either. You know, again, it kind of goes back to what they were trying to do is, what is AA's message? It's a simple spiritual program that can help you not drink and stay sober and live a fruitful life versus being highly educated in alcoholism or being a man of medicine, that sort of thing. He talks about the great paradox of AA. You have to give this away to keep it. And you hear that throughout the big book, throughout all this stuff. You have to give it away to keep it, and that is the great paradox. I'll just read a quick something out of the 12 and 12. There's another reason for, I'm very, very close to bifocals, and I was a grandma all day today, by the way. Just a side note, I was puked on, I was spit upon, I was smuggled, it was wonderful. There's another reason for this singleness of purpose. It is the great paradox of AA that we know we can seldom keep the precious gift of sobriety unless we give it away. And then it goes on to say, it has but one high mission, to carry the AA message to those who don't know there's a way out. And some of you that might be familiar with the history of Alcoholics Anonymous is that was one of the suggestions for the first edition of the big book. They wanted to call it The Way Out because that's how they saw it. And it really is true, but there was like 13 other titles that had that same name. And so there was a new guy in the group that said, why don't you just call yourselves what you are, Anonymous Alcoholics? And then boom, here we are, Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a cool story as well. We have, as alcoholics, a unique position because we can talk to another alcoholic the way no one else can. And the unique ability to each AA to identify himself with and bring to recovery the newcomer in a way depends upon his learning, eloquence, and it doesn't depend on his learning, eloquence, or any special individual skills. The only thing that matters is that he is an alcoholic who has found a key to sobriety. And so that is our singleness of purpose. So when I identify as an alcoholic, and a lot of times, meetings I've gone to across the country, they don't have speakers, they have identifiers, and that's what they do in New York. When you speak there at some of the groups, you're an identifier. I think that's how they say it. And it's really cool because, yeah, I'm identifying as an alcoholic. This is the reason why. And then when someone comes to talk to me or I talk to someone else, we're on a different level than my friend from church. You know, my friend from church was mortified. We laugh, you know. So, I think that's all I had. All right, tradition 6. Again, I'll read the long form. This is a long form. Problems of money, property, and authority may easily divert us from our primary spiritual aim. We think, therefore, that any considerable property of genuine use to AA should be separately incorporated and managed, thus dividing the material from the spiritual. An AA group as such should never go into business. Secondary aids to AA, such as clubs or hospitals, which require much property or administration, ought to be incorporated and set apart that, if necessary, they can be freely discarded by the groups. Hence, such facilities ought not to use the AA name. Their management should be the sole responsibility of those people who financially support them. For clubs, AA managers are usually preferred. But hospitals, as well as other places of recuperation, ought to be well outside of AA and medically supervised. While an AA group may cooperate with anyone, such cooperation ought never go so far as affiliation or endorsement, actual or implied. An AA group can bind itself to no one. That's a wordy statement, but how true that is. And it's funny how when you go through the traditions, and I don't know exactly where it is, but I've heard and read that all the traditions are written to support tradition 1, which is our ultimate unity. Imagine if we owned property, we had all this management going on, we'd be fighting all the time. I'll give you an example of how, we call them Alano groups up in Aberdeen. I know they're Alano groups. Our clubhouse and the group were one entity. And we started talking about the traditions, and that was a big debate. And some people were very upset, because They were holding on to things that they thought that was what recovery was a building. Well, it wasn't a building, it's what happens inside of that building. And so AA doesn't own any property, so you won't, you shouldn't see, I mean, with all the traditions, House of AA. You might see a circle and a triangle outside of the room, and you know it's an AA meeting. But as far as you guys rent space here, I assume, we don't own property in the name of AA. So the short version of that long tradition is an AA group that never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest promise of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. So Bill, he has quite a sense of humor when he writes about this stuff because, you know, we are erstwhile alcoholics, we have egos, we're, you know, and now we're sober, and we wanted to change the world. He goes on to say, this is the part where he talks about hospitals didn't like alcoholics, so we thought we'd build a chain of our own, not just one hospital, but a chain of our own. We'd gather up the derelicts from Skid Row, sort out those who could get well, and make it possible for the rest to earn their livelihood. Maybe these places wouldn't make large sums of money to carry on to other folks. We seriously thought of rewriting the laws of the land. And some of the stories that were told is that there were people that actually went, some alcoholics that went to the legislature in their state and tried to change laws. I mean, we didn't have anything to guide us before 1946. And that's when Bill put these traditions to paper. So the fact that we survived that whole period is truly amazing. And then they were presented to the fellowship in 1950 at the first General Service Conference. We of Alcoholics Anonymous could not be all things to all men, nor should we try, was the result of what they learned from that experience. He uses the term bankrupt idealist. So the reason that all of these things, we shouldn't endorse these things is it messes up what our message is. You know, there's confusion. Are you a hospital institute? Are you an educational center? Do you run a detox? What is AA? You know, and that goes back to the other true traditions is what is our message? What is our message? And again, I just have so many things. I had little smiley faces as I was going through this again. I'll tell you what, when you're asked to share on the traditions, and, you know, when I tell my story, it's my story. And I just say, God, give me the words. And tonight I said the same thing. God, give me the words. And hopefully something I say tonight will help someone to understand our fellowship. Because I believe that if I am investing in a program that's saving my life, I better know all about it. And but when you do the traditions, you kind of have to brush up on stuff. So I was reading this morning and kind of chuckling to myself and underlining things. And it says, you know, if alcoholism could be licked, so could any other problem, exclamation point. And you know what? I just nod my head to that thinking because if I were Bill's right-hand woman, I would have been thinking the same thing. Bill, we can make this into a fortune. You know? Our principles might transform the world. And I hear people say in meetings that, oh, this is such a great program. Everyone could use it. And, you know, yeah, that might be true, but we are the only ones that really, if you're truly alcoholic, you get it, you know. Otherwise, if you're not, you kind of figure out where you belong in the scheme of things. There's one section I wanted to read. We found it imperative, even inside AA, to remove the AA name from clubs and 12-step houses. I mentioned that before. These strenuous adventures implanted the deep-rooted conviction that no clear circumstances could we endorse any related enterprise, no matter how good. And again, it kind of ties back into the whole Washingtonians thing. Those principles that they were, you know, trying to endorse may seem like good things in and of themselves. But when you mix them all together, it would be like trying to have, dare I say, Republicans and Democrats and Libertarians in the same room trying to do the same thing. You know, it just, there's different ideals, there's different philosophies. Long afterward, we saw something else. We saw that the more AA minded its own business, the greater its general influence could become. Now, this is something that definitely I need to apply to my own life. We were just talking outside, my friend Jane and I, about minding your own butts. I love that statement. I'm going to use it. So the more I mind my own butt, the more things go better. So these traditions are not just things that we read at the beginning of the meeting. They can definitely be applied in my life as well. Today we understand and accept this paradox. And he mentions the word paradox several times throughout the 12 and 12 and in AA Comes of Age. The more AA sticks to its primary purpose, the greater will be the influence everywhere. And that has been true. We have groups in 142 countries around the world. So when you put your money in the basket and it goes to a stated AA purpose, it's not just here. It's to help countries that where alcoholism is illegal, and they have to have secret meetings. Some of the Muslim countries and that sort of thing, we have general service representatives that go over and help them start Alcoholics Anonymous, and they literally have to go into caves and hide. I mean, we are so fortunate to be where we are, where I literally just have to drive across town and come to a meeting, and I still complain about it, I don't want to go to that meeting, But when we stick to our purpose, things can grow. If you ever have the opportunity to attend an international, I've been to several over the years. There's 60 to 70, sometimes 80,000 people gathered in one spot. When we were down in San Antonio, the walkway is a huge drinking area if you've ever been. And all the bartenders were standing outside just looking at us in amazement as, hey, how you doing? Because no one was drinking. But anyway, there's thousands and thousands of people from all over the world that celebrate recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous. And so that tells me that when we mind our own business and stick with our primary purpose and our message, then things grow, And I've had the experience of if it doesn't stick to our message, the groups die. I've known of groups that start out and they're like, we're going to do it different. We're not following those traditions. We're going to endorse whatever we want, and they die off. And I'm not saying that they're punished by any means, but that tells me something, that these traditions are a glue that hold our fellowship together. And I tell you what, my grandson, my son isn't an alcoholic, but if my grandsons need this program, well, I shouldn't say he's not an alcoholic. He's not an alcoholic yet. But if they need this program, I want it to be in the same condition as when I walked in 23 years ago. I want to have a Jim standing by the door saying, I'm going to take you through the steps out of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm going to take you through the traditions, and you're going to learn how to be sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's why I'm pretty passionate about the traditions. I'm kind of finishing up early, and I think God's kind of telling me to shut up. So I'm not going to just babble on and on about me, although I'm sure all of you would be thrilled to hear about it. I will tell you, though, that just to finish off on Tradition 6, we saw as never before that we could not lend the AA name to any other cause other than our own. And I think that kind of summarizes those 3 traditions. And, if you ever want to talk about the traditions, or if your sponsor hasn't taken you through them, and, I'd be more than happy to talk about them, because they all intertwine with each other. And we have 312 principles, 3 sets of 12 principles: the steps, the traditions, and the concepts. And I am going to put a shameless plug in. There's a group of us that have started a concepts workshop up in Lake Ponset, and it's the second weekend in December. It is beautiful up there. And we get 50 or 60 people together, and it's a weekend camp out, and we talk about the concepts. We break them down, and you know what? They're not that scary. I mean, I still don't have them all memorized, and I still don't understand all it, but they come from our traditions, and that's the service and how we carry this message out to the world. And so if you're ever interested in that, you can sign up. You can go onto our AA.org or Area 63 website and sign up. But anyway, thank you for the privilege of sharing this information, and that's all I've got.
Thank you, Estelle. The color looks great. I'd like to thank both our speakers tonight. It was amazing. It was awesome. And we are going to finish up a little bit early, which there's nothing wrong with that. But if we could just all join hands and close with the Lord's Prayer. Who never misses a meeting.